Hi, welcome back to the podcast, HOA Hell. I'm your host, Michael Kushner, and with me today is Senior Associate from MBK Chapman, Sam Kill. Sam, good morning.
Good morning, Mike. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Today, Sam, we're going to be talking about something that can be pretty controversial, so before we start, I think it's a good idea for me to kind of give a trigger warning to our listeners out there. We're going to be talking about some free speech issues in the realm of HOA law when it comes to signs and banners and flags that people are allowed to display. And there are some very strong feelings associated with some of the opinions people have, whether it's, if you're pro-Trump or anti-Trump or pro-Black Lives Matter or anti-Black Lives Matter or pro-Pride or anti-Pride. Very strong feelings from people on both sides. And we're going to be talking about individuals' right to have a sign or banner or flag within the realm, the size that's permitted by law, but to have that on their own property and whether or not HOAs can ban that or control it. That's the issue today. So if that topic, if just thinking about Trump or thinking about Black Lives Matter or thinking about a pride flag triggers you in any way, then don't watch or don't listen or watch, depending if you're on YouTube, to, this episode, okay? I also want to make it clear that we're going to be expressing, Sam and I are going to be talking about what the law is, not what the law ought to be. We're going to be talking about what the law is. And to the extent that we seem like we're expressing opinions either way, we're really trying careful not to do that. My goal is so that at the end of this show, you don't know what side of the issue I actually fall on. I'm going to try to do that. And to the extent that I fail at that, please know we're trying to be as apolitical as possible here. What I want to focus on is what the law is, because the law is what it is, and my feelings about it are irrelevant. And so they're not, you don't need to know what those feelings are because it doesn't matter. Yep. It's just what's the law and what's not. That's what I'm here for, as a guide to talk about what the law says and doesn't say. Okay? So I've kind of given, I let the cat out of the bag.
No, that's really good. I mean, this can be something that a lot of folks have, strong feelings about, and it's very important to distinguish that there are certain parameters that, bind HOAs in terms of what they can and can't do, legally speaking, and it's both federal and state law.
Right.
And after all, I mean, these are, microcosms of society at large. So
each HOA is, right?
Each HOA
it's like a society.
Yeah, and our role really here for our audience, viewers and listeners, is to provide the information, what the law permits, and what their legal rights and interests entail.
And then you guys do with that whatever you will. Because in particular, what's over the past several years, including in the last election cycle in particular, if you even just pay any attention at all to what's happening in society, it seems, I'm not sure if it is, but it seems like we've become so polarized that whether you're on the left or the right or in the middle, the feelings are so strong that you've got, family members that they're no longer talking to other family members because of who they voted for. That's sad that happens.
It's unfortunate.
It shouldn't happen. People should have a right to kind of have their own beliefs, but at the same time, people develop these equations. They equate. Well, if you're for Trump, then that means you're this, or if you're for Black Lives Matter, that means you're this. And it's a shame that we can't just say, it doesn't mean that they're not good people, kind of thing.
And
right?
For those who've followed our podcast, I mean, one thing we emphasize is how these types of scenarios are ripe for abuse. And so when you're dealing with HOAs and HOA context, a lot of things are conflated and misused or spun or used as pretext. And that's where we are here to provide guidance and clarity.
And that's what this show is going to be about today.
Yeah.
So the question I guess we're really addressing today is, can an HOA order you to take down a political flag? Okay. So to get started on that, because I'll tell you right off the bat that both federal and state law has some very strong opinions. And I've used that word very lightly, tongue-in-cheek, has some strong opinions on the answer to that question, which you're going to find out soon, okay? But before we can really get into the nitty-gritty and give some real-life examples, we have to kind of define a couple of terms, okay? So the first term, and I'm going to let Sam handle the first part of this, is the difference between something called all speech that we're going to be talking about today. And by speech, I mean, if you say it out loud or you write it down. So if it's a flag, an American flag is a form of speech, just like talking is a form of speech, right? So we're including all communication as a form of speech. It's going to fall into two very broad categories. It's either going to be commercial speech or it's going to be non-commercial speech. Sam, Tell me what commercial speech is. Or don't tell me, I know. Tell our audience what commercial speech is.
Well, basically, Mike, as you know, in short, commercial speech is tied to an expression related to commerce. It has to do with promoting, let's say, a business or a commercial endeavor or advertising. And specifically within the context of common interest developments and residential HOAs, you're dealing with what you can and cannot do. And commercial speech in itself, there are certain exceptions that are permitted by law, specifically state law, such as in the context, this usually comes up in the context of real estate signage, which is people put up a for sale sign or sold sign
on their property,
on their property, on their lawn,
not
right?
on the common area.
Like these stakes that we usually see, they're typically of a substantially similar size.
Sometimes they're the wood things that have the for sale sign hanging on it or in escrow. Yeah.
That's something you can do, okay? Now,
can the HOA stop you from wanting, if you have a front lawn and you want to put a sign up?
Not there, but here's what they can do. They can regulate as to the size of it. So you can't possibly have like a 24-foot, right?
A
billboard or one with shining lights. They can regulate the duration of it, right? How long you can put it up and the placement of it. So while you can do it on your own front lawn and property, you can't do it in the common area or by the pool or somewhere unrelated to your property, right?
Or you can't stick them up everywhere.
Exactly, or have 1,000 of them, right? Like in smaller size that, and in the aggregate will allow you to kind of meet the parameters of what's allowed. So I mean that too would be arguably unreasonable. Now what they can regulate and prohibit is advertising. So if it's purely commercial, such as pamphlets, solicitation, they can regulate that, and if their governing documents prohibit those, that you cannot have.
Now, of course, it applies to members. If you've got people coming into your neighborhood from outside, there's not much the HOA can do.
True.
Okay.
Yeah.
But if we've all opened our front doors and seen those pads from the real estate agents, and they're really handy. Keep them in the kitchen. It's always scratch paper. My mom used to love those. We collected those, hundreds of them, because it's great to have scratch paper, right?
Yeah.
But technically speaking, that's commercial speech, and it can be regulated. An HOA can actually ban that. HOA could have a rule that says that no solicitation.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Whether it's a member or not, no solicitation, and you can tell people, did you not see the sign outside our gates, or did you not see the sign outside the neighborhood? It says no solicitation.
And you made this point, but just to be clear on my end, we're focusing on homeowners, but residents as well. These could be tenants, these could be renters. They're bound by the same governing documents that prohibit advertising.
So commercial speech is basically stuff about businesses, whether they're profit or non-profit, doesn't matter. It's a business. Okay?
Exactly. Yep.
So non-commercial speech is going to probably be almost everything else. But in the context of today's discussion, non-commercial speech is speech that is political in nature, religious in nature, or social commentary. Okay? Black Lives Matter is probably political and social.
Yeah.
I don't think it's religious, but it's at least two of those, right? A Trump thing would be, a pro-Trump flag would be political. It might also have crossed into social as well.
I think
but
so,
it's largely political, okay? So these lines are sometimes blurry, but that's what we're talking about. A POW flag could be a little bit of both.
Yeah.
I guess vote for this person for mayor of your city. That would probably be purely political. Unless your mayor was a balkanizing figure and was well known, I don't think it would cross into social. Right? You've got to be much more well known, I think, and very controversial to cross into social. But I think if you were advertising a city council member or somebody, running for mayor, that would be purely political. Okay? Those are protected. Those are considered non-commercial. And that's what we're going to focus on today. Now, there's two statutes that talk about, there are two statutes in California that specifically talk about the right to specific signage. Let me also say one more caveat. When I use the word sign today, I'm talking about signs, flags, and banners. It's considered one of the same. Those are going to be synonyms. So I'm not going to say all three of those. I might interchangeably use them, but I'm going to try to stick with signs. But whatever I say about signs, I'm going to apply to flags and banners as well, okay? But one of the state laws is part of the Davis-Sterling Act, which is near and dear to our hearts because that's what is relevant to everybody that lives in an HOA community in California, is the Davis-Sterling Act. And that is 4710 of the Civil Code. The other statute is 6704 of the Civil Code. I'll only bring that up to let you know it exists and then to tell you why it's completely irrelevant. And then I won't mention it again. And it's irrelevant because while 4710 is part of the Davis-Sterling Act and therefore completely directly applicable to the very audience that this podcast exists to talk to, 6704 is what we call the analog to that. 4710 is part of the Davis-Sterling Act, which is a set of laws that controls residential associations, HOAs, in California. 6704 is part of the Commercial CID Act. It is the commercial version of the Davis Sterling Act. It applies to businesses because, believe it or not, a lot of the time when you go into your doctor's office, for example, the doctor owns that office. He doesn't own the building. It's considered a condo, and he owns the office. Now, nobody lives there. It's not a condo in the sense that that's where the doctor lives, but he owns his unit or her unit. And the person above or the person below or the person to this left or right owns their unit or is renting it out to somebody, okay? They have HOAs too. They have associations also with CC&Rs and everything, but they're not governed by Davis Sterling. They're governed by the CID Act.
Right.
And 6704 is the commercial version of 4710. So enough said on that. I don't want to have to say that word ever again, okay? So I defined what a non-commercial sign was. A Trump flag, a Biden flag, a pride flag, a rainbow flag, a POW flag, a Black Lives Matter flag, U.S. Marine Corps, you know, you see the stickers and with the emblem. Yeah, Semper Fi or whatever.
Yeah.
So that's what we're talking about, okay? Now, I was going to have Sam explain the reason for the two statutes, and I walked all over him. So I apologize for that.
No,
Sam.
that's fine. I mean, and you did a fantastic job. I mean, the 6704 is the Commercial and Industrial CID Act, counterpart to the 4710.
Right. Yep. Okay. So 4710, part of the Davis Sterling Act.
Yeah.
Sam, is that absolute?
It's not absolute.
Okay.
No.
But we just got finished saying, or at least I'm going to say, I'll say it now, your HOA cannot prevent you from flying a flag, banner, or sign
Correct.
Of a non-commercial nature that falls into one of the categories we talked about, like, for example, a Trump flag or a Black Lives Matter flag or a pride or rainbow flag. They can't stop you from flying that flag or putting a sign up permanently on your property.
But we talked about they can regulate the size, placement of it.
Tell me about that. Can they?
So the size, absolutely, right? There's a statutory, dimensional, and you can speak to that as far as.
You go ahead.
Okay, I believe it's 9 feet for the flag, and if I'm not mistaken, it's
square feet.
Square feet, right? And it's is it 2 by 2 on actual signage on non-banner?
No, it's 9 square feet for sign and 15 square feet for banner or flag.
Yeah.
Now here's my question, and I'm not a math guy.
Okay.
You are better at that than me. I don't do math. I've told my audience.
I have to look it up specifically each time this comes up.
When you talk, I feel stupid for asking this, and maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I'll cut this from the video. If you're hearing it, I didn't cut it.
Go for it.
9 square feet. Is that basically 3 by 3?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So.
Or it could be some other
or
combination.
5 or 15 would be 5 by 3.
It could be fractions.
5 feet by 3 feet. Okay. So I got that right. All right. So maybe I'll leave it in because I got it right. So for a sign, if you want to have a 2 by 2, right, 2 square foot sign for Black Lives Matter or Trump, your HOA, and let's say it's made of normal flag material, whatever that is, nylon, whatever that material is.
Oh, yes, or something, synthetic.
Or if it's a sign, it's made of whatever signs are made of.
Yeah.
I don't have any signs. But
styrofoam.
Okay, whatever it's made of, then they can't do a darn thing about it. They can't stop you from doing it. If it's within the right size, they can't say, for example, HOA cannot say 2 by 2 or 3 by 3 is too big for our association, so we're going to say you could do 1.5 by 1.5. They can't do that. Right. They cannot. They have no power to control that. None, zero, zip.
So long as it's on your property, and
yes, of course.
What they can do is regulate if it's on common area.
Well, they could say you can't put anything on the common area.
Exactly.
Only we can.
Right.
It's not yours.
Right.
Common area doesn't belong to you or me. It belongs to us.
The really interesting part, Mike, and I know that you've dealt with this quite a bit, is when it comes to exclusive use common area. So that's where a lot of homeowners are confused.
And the law is the same.
It's the same. Yeah.
It's treated for purposes of signage. It's treated as yours.
Yeah.
Even if it's technically common area, because all exclusive use common area, like a balcony, is common area, it is still considered for purposes of putting up a sign, as long as you're not painting it permanently, right? It can't be fixed, right?
Correct.
It is your property, okay? So you can have a sign on your balcony, let's say, okay? As long as it's in the proper size, and the statute also controls material.
Right.
I can't remember all it lists. If you look at 4710, it kind of lists some things that your signs can be made out of. What it can't be is stuff that's outside of that list, because the HOA can regulate. The HOA can allow it or choose not to.
Right.
For example, HOA might not want to have a sign made of Las Vegas style flashy lights.
Yeah. Yeah. Neon lights that are bright cause like a light pollution or
would cause light pollution. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So they can control stuff like that. Okay. Now there's a public policy behind what you're hearing here. Okay. The U.S. Constitution and the California Constitution, as well as 4710 Civil Code, protect your right to free speech. Now, normally, some people might be thinking, wait a minute, free speech, the First Amendment and the California Constitution only applies to government action. That's true. But for purposes of free speech, in many cases, the law has attributed certain characteristics of the government to HOAs. They consider them in some respects to be quasi-governmental, and therefore, and this is one of them, where for purposes of these kinds of free speech rights, your HOA is going to be deemed a government entity in the sense that they have to abide by some free speech regulation.
Right.
Hence the public policy behind these, which is we have an open society and we don't want to chill people's free speech rights. People have the right to express their political, social, religious opinions as long as it doesn't cross the line into either the criminal or, well, typically into the criminal. Right. So let's move into that. There is a penal code section, and you've dealt with this. We've dealt with this as a law firm for years.
11411.
11411 of the penal code. That I'll describe what it says, and then you're going to tell me there is some HOAs in California, and you'll give a couple of examples. There are some HOAs in California that have actually attempted, knowing that under 4710 they were toast. Okay? They have tried to regulate signage that they aren't permitted to regulate by using the penal code 11411 section.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to, it's a long penal code section. You're free to go look at it yourself, but I'll break down. There's a kind of a two-avenue test here that says, okay, free speech does not extend this far. And here's where it doesn't extend. Left side over here, I don't mean left politically, I mean just on this side. You can't do something to somebody else's property. You can't go onto somebody else's property and put a signage that would be deemed, well, anything. You can't put something on somebody else's property.
Trespasser, yeah.
There's anything. You don't get to go on somebody's property and burn something. You don't get to put up some sort of monument or sign or banner or anything on somebody else's property. You can't do that, okay? And then on the other side, in addition that you can't do that, and you can't display. So now we're talking about probably including your property. You can't display something that is in and of itself terroristic or perceived as a threat. That not perceived as, because the perception is subjective. That is
creates
a threat.
Yeah.
Okay? And it's that second prong, because everybody knows you can't go on somebody else's property. You get them on trespass right there. You just call the police. Okay? So the HOA doesn't have a lot of, they're not going to be able to bootstrap in a rule because of that, right? Yeah. But the HOA has latched onto that second one. Yeah. The one I said was kind of, okay, so on this side of the issue, I don't mean left, right politically. I'm just left and right so I could separate the two, okay? And they have tried to equate some signage or banners or flags as being in and of themselves threatening or terroristic.
Yeah.
And we've seen that happen, especially in the last election cycle.
Oh,
Sam.
Yeah. Well, the first one you said is easy, right? So the second one, where they have conflated or equated, let's say, a Trump flag or a Black Lives Matter banner or flag, pride, right, as creating a terroristic threat or a conduct that is tantamount to that or analogous to a terroristic threat or a threat to health, life, and safety, essentially. That's right. And they use that and they conflate those as, look, because this is captured under this basis, namely Penal Code 11411, we can prohibit this, right? Because we're here to kind of protect and serve the community. So they use that as a pretext by conflating those issues.
And here's how it works. So here's what's happening, okay? Obviously, we've said many times before, many people's governing documents, most of the CC&Rs have nuisance provisions. So let's say somebody puts up a flag. I'm going to use a Trump flag or a Black Lives Matter or Pride. You pick, in your mind, either of the three will work. It doesn't matter for the purpose of this example. But somebody has one of those flags up. And other people in the neighborhood have visceral reactions. Yeah. They are not just like they don't agree with that, but they are offended to their core. And some of them even talk about, I want to go over there and I want to rip it out. I want to take the sign out. And we see news stories all the time. People going and stealing other people's.
Happens all the time.
Happens all the time, right?
Yeah.
I want to go beat those people up. How dare they? How dare they in our neighborhood put that up? Okay. How dare they support Trump? Or how dare they support Black Lives Matter? Or how dare they support, Pride? We're a Christian we're a Christian neighborhood. We don't do that. Whatever. Pick your poison. But they go and they start grouping together and making noise, and the board hears this and they complain to the board. They say, this is going to cause violence. This is already causing a nuisance. Yep. It's causing us to react badly, and it's creating bad feelings. And it'd be so much better if you guys just came in and said, you can't have that flag. That's what we're talking about here. And boards latched onto this second prong in 11411 of the Penal Code to justify it. And I'm here to tell you that will not fly under the law.
No.
Just because people, lots of people, have visceral or violent reactions to something does not, in and of itself, mean that it's terroristic or threatening.
Yeah.
Not until a court says it does. Again, that's never happened yet.
Yeah.
Okay? That won't be enough. And the HOAs, every one of them that's done that, when we had clients come to us, we shut it down. It's that simple. Mm-hmm. It will not fly. Mm-hmm. Okay? That is not an end run around your First Amendment or your constitutional rights under the state constitution. I think it's Article 1, Section 2. Your subjective inability to control your own emotions or your subjective dislikes or likes don't trump my protected rights. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay? So the bottom line is those kinds of social commentary, political, religious flags or banners are protected. As long as you're within the correct materials and the correct sizes that are protected under the law, the HOA can't do a damn thing about it. And it doesn't matter how many people in your neighborhood threaten violence or become viscerally angry or whatever. It doesn't matter. It's not going to be enough. Mm-hmm. Okay? And that rubs people the wrong way sometimes.
It does.
And the courts don't care.
And again, because people oftentimes they're so emotionally tied to these things and the visceral response where they conflate it with something else. They conflate it with, endorsement of conduct or something well beyond that. Mm-hmm. And that's where I think a lot of this goes sideways. Now, does that prevent folks and your neighbors from just lobbying you or talking to you? Please do this. Please refrain from this. Please. No.
That's not ostracizing you.
But that's very different from a board intervening, right, or seeking to enforce against you.
Right, with the power of fining and all that, or even foreclosing on a property.
Like
if
you said, it's a mini municipality, and that's how they're treated, so you have constitutionally protected speech rights.
In other words, I think what Sam is saying is your choice to fly a particular banner or flag or sign might have consequences socially for you. Yeah. That is what it is, okay? But it's not going to be legally permissible for the HOA to impose those consequences.
That's exactly
right.
Okay? Mm-hmm.
Now, nobody has a right, when I say consequence, nobody has a right to go and destroy your property, steal your stuff, vandalize your car, threaten you or hurt you or members of your family. Mm-hmm. That's illegal. It's a crime. That happens. You call the police.
Trespass, vandalism, you go to jail.
Yeah. Restraining order, call the police, get them arrested.
Exactly.
There's a lot of things you can do if that happens, okay? None of this, that's not the consequences we're talking about. The consequences we're talking about are things like you piss off a bunch of your neighbors and you're no longer invited to the Sunday football game that you used to go to at the that all your neighbors go to at John's house. Mm-hmm. You're not going to be invited anymore, maybe. Okay, well that's their house. They can invite who they want. Yeah. We have to face the consequences of our political beliefs, and we've all seen in the last several years a real polarization when it comes to politics. Especially with a polarizing figure like Trump in office, and even before him, Biden. You had people on both sides that would have hatred for the other side just for being supporters of them. And it's not illegal. It's not illegal to hate, okay? It's unfortunate, but it's not illegal. And so what we're talking about today is, can the HOA come in and say, because you're causing all this kerfuffle in our neighborhood, we really want you to take that down. That's what we're talking about today, and that's not going to be permissible.
Yeah.
Sam.
The only comment I was going to make, Mike, is these volunteers who serve on these HOA boards, they're part of this community.
They're regular people.
Part of this microcosm, this community, right? And so they're not legally trained necessarily. They're not professional CEOs or directors. So they're not infallible.
Yep.
So when they have the same visceral responses and reactions. And unfortunately, where they go sideways, and we see this all the time.
Is that they have power.
Is that they have power, and then they abuse that power.
That's right. And that's why we're here. That's why we're here. Mm-hmm. So let's sum up, okay? California law distinguishes very clearly between commercial and non-commercial speech.
Yeah.
Commercial speech can be regulated or banned entirely, with the exception of specific carve-outs in the law, like having a for sale sign. And non-commercial speech can be regulated to the extent that it goes beyond what the law allows, size or material, Okay. There's also one other little hole that I didn't discuss, and I'll mention it only to say that it's unsettled and I'm not sure. But that is, there's nothing in the statute, 4710, for example, that talks about how many signs you can have on your property. But many people in some legal treatises out there that discuss this, and I haven't found a case right on point, not yet, but at least Davis Sterling wise, but that have said, look, it doesn't say anything about number of, but our guess is that as long as it doesn't go beyond what the size was. So let's say you have 1 by 1 flags, okay? Well, maybe you could have 15 of those in a given area because it would equal 15 square feet. You know what I mean? But you can't have, you're not gonna be able to put 1,000 of these on your lawn, okay? Because that would go beyond the 9 square feet, let's say, for signage, okay? So the idea here is, I guess reasonableness would come in here, but it's never actually been tested, so I don't know. I'm gonna guess that it would be reasonable if you were within the, if you added the square footage up and it still equaled the permissible size, you'd be fine. But anything beyond that, the HOA could probably cut it back. But that's a guess. I don't know. I'm just using logic. But to sum up, commercial, non-commercial, we've done. Okay. Right. HOA has a lot more restraints, significantly powerful restraints on its ability to control that non-commercial speech. And so you have a right to display your pride flag, your rainbow flag, your Black Lives Matter, your Trump, your Biden, your POW, your Marine Corps, Semper Fi, those sorts of things, social commentary type flags. You have a right to display those, okay? As long as you're otherwise abiding by what the law says, size and material-wise, okay? So valid restrictions, if it's a real threat to health and safety, which you don't just get to declare it is and then it is, it has to be, or material or size. Other than that, pretty limited. You agree?
Very heightened standard.
Very heightened standard.
Agreed.
If you like this episode, please hit the like button and be sure to subscribe to the channel, HOA Hell, if you haven't already done that. If you have any questions or you want to make a comment about the topic of this show or any other show, we'd love to hear from you. Until next time.